Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for attending today's session. This is our last session for this round of trainings. So just a couple reminders before we get started. Please keep your microphones and your cameras off to prevent distraction. Also, if you have questions, please type them in the chat box and I will relay them to our presenters at the end of the presentation today. Also, if you need a certificate of completion, please email Stacy at the end of today's session and she will get that out to you. And lastly, our survey will be sent out. Keep an eye out for that. And if you have any topics or any feedback at all, we greatly appreciate that. We will start our next round of trainings probably mid-September. So if you have any topics you'd like to see presented on, please email me and we will see what we can do. With that, I will turn it over to our presenters.
Hello, can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Yep.
Hi, I am Paige. I am the Administrative Coordinator for Housing Stabilization, and I'm joined by Karen. She's our Service Provider Relations Coordinator for Housing Stabilization. And we're just going to give a broad overview of some of the assistance that we offer within our programs. So we'll start with the Housing Stabilization Program. This is a program that assists individuals that are experiencing homelessness. We define homelessness as a household that individual or family that lacks a fixed, regular, or adequate nighttime residence. This might include a situation where they're temporarily doubled up with another household, transitioning out of a treatment or corrections facility, any situation like that. They must have experienced a financial hardship during the pandemic. That could have happened anytime in the last 4 years, whether it be losing a job, decreased wages, anything that might have affected them during this time. And they must be at or below that income limit of 30% area median income for their county, and they must spend the majority of their nights in North Dakota. For the assistance that's offered with this program, we offer deposit and application fee assistance. Sorry, was there a question? Okay, I'll continue on. With the deposit and application fee assistance, we do have a requirement for a ledger submission just so that we can know how much those fees are, and if they've already been paid, we unfortunately do not offer reimbursement. With a criminal conviction or felony with a previous rental judgment, we do offer double deposit if it is required by that housing provider. We offer up to 6 months of rental assistance, and we also offer past housing debt assistance. So if someone is struggling finding housing and they have a previous rental debt that is creating a barrier for them, we are able to assist them and pay off that debt if they are eligible for the program. The letter of commitment is kind of our bread and butter. That is maybe if you're a housing provider, what you might know us for. It is our commitment to provide that deposit application fee assistance as well as rental assistance upon that renter submitting their housed application and following all of the terms of the letter of commitment. We also offer various referrals to other programs with the state or federal programs. One of those is our HUDAS assessment that we do through Medicaid 1915I, which is a relatively new program that helps those with disabilities receive additional assistance while on Medicaid. We offer referrals to SNAP, TANF, basically anything else within the Economic Assistance Division, and referrals to housing authorities if a renter might need some longer-term housing supports that our program isn't able to offer. And just to kind of assess the household for other various life needs. And then we also do some coaching and training opportunities, which I will turn over to Karen to go more in depth into.
Hello, everyone. I'm just going to go into a little bit what the coaching sessions look like for the renters. So there's different topics that we do cover. We start with the letter of commitment, and basically break down the purpose, the rules of use, and the conditions of the letter of commitment. We also go into teaching the renter, reading a lease, the requirements, what to look for with those requirements, responsibilities, and fees within the lease. The next thing that we will dive into with the renter is just the responsibilities of being a new renter. So how to build positive relationships with the housing providers, and just general tips on how to be a good renter. In future months, we'll go into employment and childcare. So we'll address those household issues with employment and childcare needs, if applicable, for that renter, along with financing and budgeting for the renter, and just teaching them monthly household budgeting tips. We end with a housing stability check-in to check on their current status of the household, just regarding wide general topics from food stability, EA program applications, utilities, transportation, childcare, and just other areas that the household has used or could use, that we can put them in touch with so that they can remain stably housed. The next topic that I want to talk about is our eviction prevention program. So who qualifies for this program? We define it that they have to be at imminent risk of eviction. So what is that? They basically have to have an outstanding rental debt, a 3-day eviction notice, lease termination notice, or eviction hearing scheduled within the next 30 days. So one of those is a qualification for the eviction prevention program. They also must have experienced a financial hardship during the pandemic. They must be below income limit of 30% area median income, and they have to have a valid lease agreement already with a housing provider. The eviction prevention program offers assistance that is past due amounts required to cancel the eviction. They also are eligible for up to 6 months of rent assistance. We also will do the HUDAS assessment and the 1959 referrals that Paige had referred to, and we also can do referrals to other EA programs for that renter, as well as referrals to housing authorities and just other resources for various other life needs. And they also will be eligible for the coaching training opportunities, the same as with the renters with the letter of commitment. Next, I'm going to turn it back to Paige, who's going to go into the documents that are required.
Thanks, Karen. So first up is our housing stabilization application. This would be the application that is submitted by the household experiencing homelessness. So it is our application with the least amount of requirements from this chart. The only document that is an optional document here is that past debt that is buried to housing. If they don't have it, they don't need to submit it. But we do require that government issued photo ID and income documentation. Moving on to the housed application. Once they sign that lease with their letter of commitment, we'll need a copy of that lease and a ledger so we know who to pay, how much to pay, and can verify everything through those documents. Again, income documentation, just in case anything's changed in between the time that they submitted their homeless application and their housed application. With our eviction prevention application, all the same requirements as that housed application, with the addition of a 3-day notice, lease termination, eviction court date, or just their ledger showing a past due balance. With the limits of the program, I'll start with the housing stabilization program. Again, income must be under 30% of the area median income, and they must be experiencing homelessness or at imminent risk of homelessness. Combined between the eviction prevention and the housing stabilization program, renters may get up to 6 months of assistance. It's not 6 months of assistance per program, if that makes sense. With the housing stabilization program, we do security deposit, application fees. Again, those can only be paid after a housed application has been submitted with that signed lease. And then applicants will complete coaching tasks for any additional payments to be released. So we have corresponding payments with those coaching tasks. For instance, the employment childcare coaching session that Karen discussed is for our month 4 payment. So applicants must complete that coaching session in order to have their 4th month of assistance payment released. With the eviction prevention program, same income limit, again, combined with the housing stabilization program, up to 6 months of assistance. They must be demonstrating some sort of risk of eviction, whether that be outstanding rental debt, eviction court date, 3-day notice, or lease termination. With this eviction prevention program, we do work closely with housing providers to make sure that our payment is enough to be able to get their eviction proceedings canceled if they do have an eviction court date scheduled already. And so that housing provider does need to be registered to be able to accept funds from us directly. We don't want that lump sum eviction prevention payment going to the renter. We just want it going directly to that housing provider so that they can make sure that debt is covered. Applicants will also complete coaching tasks for payments to be released, but that eviction prevention payment will be released regardless of where they are at with their coaching tasks. And that is all we have, and we will open it up to questions now.
Katrina, if you want to just come off of mute, you can ask your question. And yes, they will get me the slides and we will get those sent out.
So I have a participant, sorry, I'm a care coordinator with the Community Connect program. And I have a participant who has been on housing stabilization, but is at imminent risk of eviction because they have run out of their ND rent help time. And they are waiting for a decision for Social Security to be able to pay rent on their own. Would they still be eligible for eviction prevention, or are they simply out of time?
With any case-specific ones, we really would have to kind of look into those. So I would encourage you to reach out to our email or our hotline to make sure that we can review the case fully and kind of see where that person is at with how many months they've received so far. But we would always encourage an application submission if you feel that person may qualify.
There's a couple in the chat. Where should we refer people who would like to participate in the program?
Yep, so they can visit the housing stability website. They'll apply right there online. If they have questions or need assistance with it, then they can go through the general number there and call if they have any questions. But it's all online, and they'll just do the application right there. And just to piggyback what Paige said, if they did receive rent assistance with us in the past, the lump sum eviction prevention payment to get them current, they can still apply for that. The future rent that they may qualify, that will kind of depend on what they've already received, but definitely if it's a specific case and you email in the name to the inbox there at the end of the presentation, we can look at individual case by case on those too as well.
Do your programs work in conjunction with Section 8? For example, Section 8 does not cover security deposits.
So in a way, yes, we are able to pay for anything that Section 8 isn't covering. So if Section 8 covers $400 of a $500 rental amount, we could cover the $100 tenant share. We just can't duplicate any of their assistance.
What should someone who is struggling to pay bills but is prioritizing rent above all else do to get onto this program? This person is not technically at imminent risk of homelessness as they have been completely paying their rent but are behind on all other bills.
So with this, so they do have to be behind on rent. That is one of the requirements, that to qualify for this program, they do have to show that they are behind.
As a property management company, are we required by law to accept payment?
So we'll reach out. So, as Paige said, I work directly with the housing provider. So when an application comes in, we will reach out. We wouldn't, send a payment to you unless we get approval from you that you're willing to cancel the eviction and accept the payment. You do not have to do a housing provider request. We prefer it and I encourage it because the eviction prevention payment for any renter that is approved is going to go directly to the housing provider as long as you're set up with a supplier ID. That's regardless of whether or not you submit a payment request or not. But without a payment request, future rent would go directly to the renter and they would be responsible to turn it over. So I always encourage that for the housing providers that are willing to participate and work with the renter, and cancel any kind of eviction notice when they're approved. I just encourage the housing provider request, so that the future rent goes to you as well. But again, we will do the outreach. And if we receive back that you're not willing to accept the payment and cancel the eviction, we wouldn't send payment directly to you without that approval that you give us.
Will past due debts be paid right away, or will they need an approval for an apartment first?
So they don't need an approval for an apartment first. They can just, if they're experiencing homelessness and they know that they have that past debt, that's probably gonna make it difficult for them to find an apartment. They can just submit that with their first application. They do not need an approval or even a rejection from an apartment first.
What?
Are folks who received ND rent help benefits eligible for these programs? I once had a client tell me they didn't qualify because they exhausted their ND rent help.
So with this, the ND Rent Help program was our program that did up to 12 months of assistance. That would be the maximum benefit for that program. With the programs that we discussed today, combined, it's 6 months of assistance. So they could have received those up to 12 months on ND Rent Help and still potentially qualify, meeting all the other qualification criteria for these programs, the housing stabilization and eviction prevention programs, and still get those up to 6 months.
Why would an agency not want to accept payments from you?
I guess that just kind of depends on the housing provider. Our goal is to work with each housing provider so that they do accept the payments and we can keep that renter in their home.
Can past housing debt from out of state be addressed with these funds? What kind of proof of that debt is required?
I actually am not sure about this one. Karen, do you know the answer? Or Eric or Emily, if you're on the call, do you know?
I do not. We could find out though.
Can
Yes.
you repeat the question? I'm sorry, I think I missed part of it.
Can past housing debt from out of state be addressed with these funds? What kind of proof of that debt is required?
Sure. So if it's a past debt from another state, we can assist if they can provide documentation that it is a barrier to their current housing situation. We would need a ledger from their previous landlord, just like an in-state housing provider, documentation showing who holds that debt. And then we would take a look at it to see if they would be eligible for payment.
Do homeless households who have also applied for rental debt relief still have to remain homeless while NDHS makes the determination on whether they can pay said debt?
Will you say that again? So you're saying that they applied for past debt, but is that the application that they're saying they applied for just to get their past debt cleared, or that they applied for a letter of commitment?
Nika, do you want to clarify your question?
Yes, in the past I had clients who applied as homeless and were approved as homeless, but they also had previous rent debt that was a known barrier for them. And from what the rules were at that time, because you had to prove that the rent debt was a barrier, if you applied for rent debt relief and while waiting for NDHS to make their determination on it, you were able to find housing in spite of that debt, it ceased to be a barrier. You had obtained housing, and in some cases, NDHS or ND Rent Help would then not make a payment on that rent debt because it ceased to be a barrier.
That I'm not sure. Emily, can you expand on that with the past?
Yeah, it does still need to be a barrier to finding housing. We try to get them processed as quickly as we can, so that we can get it taken care of before they find their housing, to eliminate that barrier. But if it is no longer a barrier, that would not qualify for a past debt payment.
So in other words, yes, they do have to remain homeless in order to potentially receive the rent debt relief payment. Is that correct?
That's correct. If they find housing, then that past debt is no longer a barrier. Correct.
To clarify, a client does not need a denial letter to have past housing areas paid, just a statement of the debt that is due.
Yes, that's correct.
With the ND Rent Help, I was helping a homeless lady in North Dakota with a Colorado debt and was taken care of, but maybe that has changed.
I think that was a comment when we were addressing the past debt that's out of state. I think
Yep.
that was a kind of a comment to that.
Would a past due rent from before the pandemic be eligible if it is a barrier to finding housing now?
Yes. Simple answer.
I was told that out-of-state old debt was not able to be covered, even if it is a barrier to finding new housing in North Dakota.
I'm not sure where that answer came from, but we are able to assist as long as we can get the documentation necessary to make the payment.
With all of these different programs, how does someone even know where to begin? Are those in housing helping individuals connect with all of these programs?
I would suggest visiting our website, the hhs.nd.gov, and then apply for help. You can see the different programs that we have available. There's a section for renters and a section for housing providers. And again, reach out to the number or the email on the screen, and we can help kind of guide them to the right program that we might be able to assist them with.
Why is there a requirement that the applicant have been affected by the pandemic? Is that a starter for someone who was not employed during or financially impacted directly by the pandemic?
So the pandemic relation is due to our funds come from the federal Treasury guidelines that were set forth for the American, I think, Rescue Plan Act is what it's called. But ultimately it was born out of COVID, and these are COVID funds, so we have to relate them somehow back to COVID.
Is there a limit on how much you will pay if bad debts are a barrier?
Not at this time. We don't have a current limit on the past debt.
Okay. I work for the DOCR, and we currently have Community Option helping us with submitting NDRH housing stabilization applications. Their partnership ends at the end of this month. Our residents have very limited access to the internet. Is there an alternative to submitting for our guys that do not normally have emails to check and no internet access?
I don't have, unless Paige or anything, Emily have any other, that I'm not aware of, but, at this time, I don't have any other alternatives other than, I always encourage, I work with a lot of housing providers, single housing providers, that they don't have access to email, and they don't necessarily work with email, but they have friends, family, library, just to be able to assist them to go in and be able to submit the application. And we'll work with them over the phone and help them as much as we're able so that they can get the application submitted as well.
Is there a timeline for how long these programs will be running?
Yes, so we are tentatively scheduled to run through mid-2025 as long as funding is available.
Am I understanding correctly that if someone starts the process with you and there is a plan to pay off their debt, hold on. But then they obtain housing, that you will withdraw this assistance?
The past debt payment is made in one lump sum, so it's just a one-time payment to pay off that assistance. So for example, they submit the application today and tomorrow they find housing before we have a chance to review that application for the past debt assistance. It would not be a barrier to them finding housing, so they would not be eligible for that past debt assistance, if that makes sense. But if we've already agreed to pay the past debt and they find housing as a result, a lot of landlords will accept our guarantee of payment to allow that person to move forward with their application. So that would not be considered, we would not remove that assistance at that point. Hopefully that makes sense.
I joined late, so may have missed this, but if past debt includes damages, are those covered or only rental arrears?
It would be the past debt amount owed to the previous landlord that's creating the barrier. So if that includes damages, we would just need a breakdown of what is owed, and that would be reviewed for eligibility.
Is this rent help that helps for 3 months? Sorry, I missed the first 15 minutes of the presentation.
We can provide up to 6 months of rental assistance, depending on eligibility. We'll provide the slides at the end of this too for anyone that missed part of it.
And it's also being recorded, so we will send out the, get the link sent out too. So for people that either came late or missed it, it'll be available that way too. Let's see. How do we ask for a letter of commitment for application and holding fee? Is there a way to message in the application area?
So the first application that would be submitted to receive a letter of commitment would be our housing stabilization application, and those are specifically only for individuals that are experiencing homelessness. So they would need to meet those criteria, have that application approved, and then a letter of commitment would be issued. That letter of commitment would state on there that we'd be able to assist with application fees, security deposit, as long as that balance is still due.
Is there a way to handle landlords that won't accept the first month's rent deposit through NDRH, but will accept it for the months afterwards?
I guess if you're asking if there's a way to send a deposit first, unfortunately, no, it does come after the like the process of getting the housed app. I do try to work with housing providers, and that we do ask that if housing providers with that letter of commitment do let the renters move in with that letter, work quickly to get the housed app completed and get the housing provider request in. The sooner the housing provider can complete their payment request and we can get them matched up, the sooner it can be reviewed and payment can be issued.
How are households informed that their past due debts are processed or paid? Is there a timeline? A household had submitted a pass-through payment in the beginning of May, has not received any information since. Should they reach out to the help desk?
Yes, any individual questions like that or that we can look into for you, definitely email the help desk with the specifics and we can get that to the right department so we can dig into it for you.
So what are they supposed to do after the 6 months are exhausted? Are we hoping that they gain employment, get on Section 8, or hope that we get additional funding from the government? I'm asked this all the time and never had a great answer.
Yeah, so that's how we kind of came around to our coaching is we've had quite a few individuals get to the end of our assistance and still come back needing more. So with our coaching, we're hoping that we can get them better employment if they're already employed or give them tips on just different resources that they can get access to help them pay other parts of their bills so they're able to afford their rent better, or if they need that long-term housing stability that Section 8 can offer, if we can direct them that direction. That's what we're trying to do with those coaching sessions.
Are there any more questions? Great. Well, oh, here comes one. What are you most excited or impressed about with the NDRH's system?
I think, well, for myself, I do work with housing providers a lot, but just being able to talk to them and be able to explain with the coaching that we are doing now, and really just trying to um, help the renter in all facets. So whether it's with partnering for employment or helping them with resources for childcare, but just realizing all the things that go into keeping that renter housed and how we can contribute and help them in all facets of their life.
Is the coaching mandatory?
It is mandatory for some payments to be released. We did kind of touch a little bit on the coaching within the presentation, but for instance, the employment childcare training that Karen had discussed earlier, that's correlated with our month 4 payment. So that training must be completed in order for the 4th month of assistance to be issued out, for instance.
Is there a notice on the housing stability website that households will need a previous ledger from a housing provider if it is different from the one they are currently needing assistance with?
I guess on our first housing stability or housing stabilization application, there is a checkbox to mark if they have a past debt that is a barrier for housing, and they are able to upload that information, whether it be a past ledger or debt from a collection agency, wherever that debt may be. They can upload that there.
Sorry, I just wanted to jump on. That was my question. My name is Cheryl. I guess to go more specific into my question, for a household who is reapplying again for the program because they have a 3-day notice or a court date scheduled for eviction, and they had received the housing stability assistance at a previous location, is that noted on your website when they're reapplying for assistance? Because we've run into where households apply and then they are asked to have a re-review to receive the ledger from where they previously received the assistance. Sometimes landlords are very quick to provide that. Sometimes they're not. Is that causing a barrier to households' new applications being processed?
Well, I think you're referring to, so if they received rent help as part of the 12 months, part of the program requirement is to ensure that they complied with paying their renter portion for those previous months. And we request documentation from that previous housing provider to ensure that those requirements were met. I believe it's on the website in our requirements, but we can double check and make sure. And if not, we'll get it added to that.
How long is the average turnaround from requesting assistance to receiving it? I'd love to let people know who ask.
So there's a lot of factors that go into that. You know, we do work them as they come in as quick as we can, but there are, when for example, if a renter applies for eviction prevention payment, we give the housing provider 21 days to respond to us. Now, of course, we try to get a response much before the 21 days, but technically we do have to give them the 21 days. Also, applications that don't come in with all the information can end up going to re-review, and a renter has 10 days to respond to get us that. So I can't give a definite time frame because there's other factors that go into it, but they're worked very diligently to get matched and get to review so that we can get a decision and get payment off as soon as we possibly can.
One of the biggest barriers that clients seem to have is finding places that will accept housing assistance. Does this program find this to be true as well? If yes, is there anything that is being done to address this barrier?
I'll address this one because I know Karen won't toot her own horn, but that our housing provider outreach team is phenomenal. And they are so good at working with housing providers to explain our process and tell, you know, kind of the benefits of of accepting our funds and things like that. So that housing provider outreach team has worked constantly trying to explain our program.
Is there a time limit on applications? Say they are approved for assistance, but takes time finding housing.
There's kind of like a couple different answers to this. So, one time limit is our re-review window. So for instance, if eligibility is missing, say income documentation from an adult household member on the application, if the application is sent to re-review and the applicant is given 10 days to submit the missing information. So there is a time limit on that part of the application. The only other limit that I can think of is our letter of commitment. It does expire after 90 days. So if a household has not found housing after 90 days, they will have to submit another housing stabilization application to get a new letter of commitment or get their letter of commitment renewed. I mean,
Any other question? Oh. So is the letter of commitment mailed to the applicant or to the housing facilitator assisting?
The letter of commitment is emailed out to the housing facilitator and the applicant if there is a housing facilitator on the application. Otherwise, it is available for the applicant or housing facilitator in that applicant's portal.
What ways can we help support the program other than just sharing about the program and getting the news out there?
I think doing just that is huge, and just the benefits of it, and you know, with both renters and housing providers, and just making them aware. I know that that's what we do as a housing provider team to try to outreach and explain. So, you know, that alone, if you're doing that and you're sharing that, you are so supporting it, and we appreciate that.
Sorry, I was muted. Can the DOCR use one generic email for all residents that we apply with, or do they all need their own email?
We'd prefer if they do get set up with their own email address. It just makes it easier, if once they leave DOCR, to be able to contact them again. Otherwise, we just kind of, it might get lost if you start submitting a bunch of applications with one DOCR email. You might get bogged down with a bunch of emails if you start doing a bunch of applications through that. So
we do have some groups that we set them up similar to our housing facilitators. If one person is willing to help folks submit their application, we can set them up with a special type of account within our system where they can submit multiple applications for different folks. So I would encourage you to reach out to our DHS ERB email with if you have somebody like that would be willing to help those folks. Like Paige said, we do encourage them to have their own email address, but in those circumstances, it would go to both email addresses. But that is an option too, if you have someone willing to submit those applications for your folks there at the DOCR. So if you reach out, if you have something like that, and we can get you some additional information.
Any other questions? We do have some time left, so I don't want to hurry anybody, but I also want to be mindful of the time and everybody's time. So I'll give it a couple more minutes for questions. If you have any. And again, this is being recorded. So we will get that link sent out to you. Probably tomorrow or the next day. And as well as our survey. So again, just when that comes out to you, please take a couple minutes and provide any feedback or any topics that you want to hear in our next series of trainings, which will start in the middle of September. With that, I don't see any other questions, so I think we will wrap up today. If you do have questions, please reach out to their email address here, shown on the last slide. And again, we will get the slide sent out to you as well. So thank you again for attending today's session and all of the previous sessions. And we hope to see all of you in the fall. Hope everybody has a great summer, and thank you, Karen and Paige, for presenting.
Thank you.
thank you, everyone.